On the massive starship Seraphim, the hum of the engines was a constant reminder of the vastness of space. The ship, a symbol of power and diplomacy, was traveling through the uncharted regions of the galaxy. Its crew was made up of various alien species, each with unique abilities and technologies. Among them were the Caravans, a race of beings known for their intelligence, strength, and technological advancements. To the rest of the galaxy, the Caravans were considered one of the most superior species. Captain Thalmar, a high-ranking officer among the Caravans, stood by the observation window, looking out at the endless blackness of space. The stars flickered like distant flames, too far to reach but beautiful in their solitude. Thalmar had always been proud of his species' accomplishments. The Caravans had mastered technologies that could bend the laws of physics and manipulate time itself. Their intelligence was unmatched, and their ships could outmaneuver any fleet in the galaxy. Yet today, Thalmar's mind was preoccupied with something he rarely considered: marriage. It was not something that had ever held much interest for him. To the Caravans, relationships were practical, built on duty rather than emotion. And today, he was about to marry a human, a species known for their primitive ways and short lifespan. In the eyes of the Caravans, humans were weak, often seen as little more than children of the galaxy, barely able to understand the complexity of interstellar life. Thalmar's marriage was not one of love, but a political arrangement. It was meant to strengthen ties between the Caravans and the humans, to build a bridge between two very different worlds. His human spouse, Emilia Jones, had been chosen not for any special qualities, but for her status and family connections. She was to be a tool in the grand design of galactic diplomacy, and Thalmar had accepted the arrangement without much thought. When Emilia had first arrived on the Seraphim, Thalmar had been unimpressed. She was small, by Caravan standards, with pale skin and dark hair that framed her face in loose waves. She looked delicate, almost fragile, standing in stark contrast to the powerful beings around her. Thalmar had met her once before the ceremony, and she had been polite, respectful, but there was a sadness in her eyes, a hint of something deeper. He had assumed it was the weight of the situation, the gravity of marrying into a race so far beyond her own. The Caravan customs surrounding marriage were strict. The partners were expected to learn everything about each other's culture, to live as one for the sake of unity and peace. Emilia had done her part, following the rituals with grace. But Thalmar had noticed how she kept to herself. She was quiet, observant, always in the background. He had brushed it off as nervousness, a human trait that he had come to expect. But there was something else in her behavior, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. Thalmar's duties on the ship kept him busy. He had little time to think about his new wife, and he often found himself lost in the endless tasks of managing the Seraphim's operations. The ship was a marvel of Caravan engineering, a floating city that could travel faster than the speed of light. It was home to thousands of beings, all working together in perfect harmony. The peace between the various species was delicate, and Thalmar's role was to maintain it. But even with all the technology at his disposal, nothing could have prepared him for the events that would unfold in the coming days. Emilia had shown a keen interest in the ship's workings. At first, Thalmar had thought it was just a passing curiosity, something she would lose interest in once she got settled. But as the days passed, he began to notice her quietly observing the crew, asking questions about the ship's systems, and paying close attention to the Caravan way of life. She had a sharp mind, he realized, but it was difficult for him to reconcile this with the image of her as a simple, weak human. One evening, as Thalmar was reviewing reports in his quarters, he heard the soft sound of footsteps outside his door. He opened it to find Emilia standing there, her expression calm, but there was something about the way she held herself that seemed different. She was no longer the shy, timid woman he had married. There was a quiet strength in her now, an air of purpose. "Captain," she said, her voice steady but filled with something Thalmar couldn't place, "I would like to learn more about the Caravan technology."
I believe there's more to it than what has been taught so far.
Thalmar raised an eyebrow. He had assumed she was content with the basics, as most humans were when it came to advanced alien technology. But her request intrigued him. Perhaps she was smarter than he had given her credit for. "I can arrange for a tour of the central systems," Thalmar offered, unsure of what to make of her sudden interest. But Emilia shook her head. "I don't need a tour."
I want to understand the deeper mechanics, how your people control the energy flows, manipulate the ship's gravity fields, and your knowledge of subspace engineering. I've been studying the fundamentals already.
Thalmar stood still, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't just her words that bothered him, but the way she had said them. There was no fear in her tone, no hesitation. It was as if she had already studied these things in secret. A small seed of doubt began to grow in Thalmar's mind, but he quickly dismissed it. Emilia was a human, after all.
No human could ever understand caravan technology in such a short time.
The next few days passed without incident, but Thalmar could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. Emilia continued to behave strangely, always lingering near the ship's control rooms, always asking questions that seemed to go beyond the basics. He tried to ignore it, chalking it up to her curiosity, but deep down, a part of him began to question just how much she was learning. On the fourth day after their conversation, something happened that would change everything. The Seraphim was suddenly jolted by a violent tremor. The lights flickered and the ship's systems went into emergency mode. Thalmar rushed to the bridge, his heart racing. He could hear the panic in the voices of the crew as they scrambled to assess the situation. "Report!" Thalmar demanded as he entered the command center. "Captain, we've been hacked!" Lieutenant Varn reported, her voice tight with fear. "Someone's breached our internal security systems. We're locked out of several key areas, including the engines and the central command grid." Thalmar's mind raced. The Karevans had built the Seraphim to be unbreachable, and yet here they were, facing a crisis they had never anticipated. His gaze shifted to Emilia, who stood in the doorway, her face pale but composed. She had been nearby when the tremor hit, and her expression told him everything he needed to know. Without saying a word, she turned and walked out of the room, heading toward the lower decks where the main security hub was located. Thalmar watched her go, a feeling of dread settling in his stomach. Something was wrong, but it wasn't just the hack. It was Emilia and the secrets she seemed to be hiding. The Seraphim continued its journey through the endless depths of space. The hum of its engines was a constant, like a heartbeat that never stopped. But inside the vast ship, there was an uneasy silence. Thalmar had not been able to shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the sudden malfunction in the ship's systems. No, it was Emilia, his human wife. She had become more distant, more focused on things Thalmar never imagined her to be interested in. She spent hours in the ship's library, which was one of the most advanced databases in the galaxy, filled with knowledge from countless civilizations. Every day, she asked the crew to show her more, to teach her more about caravan technology. And every day, Thalmar watched from afar, his suspicion growing. At first, he had dismissed her interest as a passing curiosity, but now he began to realize that it was something more. Emilia was no longer the timid woman he had married. She was becoming someone else, someone with an understanding of the Karevan ship systems that surpassed even some of the most experienced crew members. Thalmar couldn't ignore it any longer. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. He had always considered the caravans to be superior, their technology and knowledge far beyond that of any other species in the galaxy. But now, it seemed like Emilia was catching up, and that troubled him deeply. She was a human, a species considered weak and primitive by every other alien race, including his own. Thalmar was no fool. He had seen humans before. They were strong in their own way, yes, but they were not known for their intelligence or technological skills. Yet, Emilia was different. She was not just a passive observer of the caravan way of life. She was learning at an alarming rate, absorbing knowledge about the ship's systems as if she had been trained for this all her life. One evening, after a long day of work, Thalmar went to his quarters to find Emilia once again deep in the ship's control systems. She was sitting at a console, her fingers moving quickly over the keys, her eyes focused and determined. Thalmar had to admit it. She was good. Very good. But how? How could a human, with no advanced training in caravan technology, know so much? He stood in the doorway, watching her for a long moment. Amelia didn't notice him at first. She was completely absorbed in her work. It was only when Thalmar cleared his throat that she looked up, her expression unreadable. "Amelia," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "What are you doing?" For a brief moment her eyes flickered with surprise. Then she smiled, but it was a tight, almost calculating smile.
"Just learning more about the ship," she replied, her voice steady. "I thought I could help out." Thalmar frowned.
"Help out? This ship is the pinnacle of caravan engineering. You're not equipped to understand it, let alone operate it."
Amelia didn't seem bothered by his words.
Instead, she stood up and walked over to him, her movements calm, almost graceful. "I understand more than you think, Thalmar," she said, her voice soft but carrying an edge that Thalmar had never heard before.
"I've been studying the ship's systems for a while now, and I believe I can help you."
"I can help everyone."
Thalmar's heart raced as the weight of her words settled in. There was something behind them, something he couldn't quite grasp. She wasn't just talking about learning how to pilot the ship, or understanding the basics of caravan technology. No, Amelia was talking about something deeper, something more dangerous. "Help us?" Thalmar repeated, his voice laced with suspicion. "What exactly do you mean?" Amelia met his gaze, her eyes clear and focused. "I mean that I can help you with something much bigger than this ship, Thalmar. I've been learning how to manipulate the ship's core systems, to control the energy fields and the gravity drives, and I can help you stop what's coming." Thalmar felt a chill run down his spine. "What's coming?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Before Amelia could answer, the entire ship jolted violently, sending Thalmar stumbling forward. The lights flickered, and the ship's alarms blared. The sound of metal groaning under stress echoed through the walls. Thalmar quickly grabbed the nearest panel, steadying himself as the Seraphim rocked again. "Emergency," the ship's automated voice announced. "Internal breach detected. Security lockdown initiated." Thalmar's mind raced. A breach? How? The Seraphim was supposed to be impenetrable. The security systems were the most advanced in the galaxy, designed to keep even the most sophisticated enemies out. He turned to Amelia, his heart pounding in his chest.
"What did you do?" Amelia's calm expression never wavered. She took a slow step toward him, her eyes filled with something new, something dark.
"I didn't do anything," she said quietly. "But someone else did." As if on cue, the ship's systems began to flash with warnings. The central command grid had been hacked. Someone was inside the Seraphim, bypassing the most secure systems with ease. Thalmar's mind raced, piecing together what Amelia had said. She had been learning how to control the ship's core systems. But why? What was her real purpose here? Before he could ask another question, the door to his quarters slammed open, and a group of caravan security officers rushed in, their faces filled with panic. "Captain!" one of them shouted. "The control center has been breached! The ship is under attack!" Thalmar's mind spun. It was impossible. No one, not even a caravan, could have hacked the ship's central system so quickly. And yet, here they were, on the brink of disaster. "Who's behind this?" Thalmar demanded, his voice rising in anger. One of the officers looked at him with wide eyes. "We don't know, sir. The systems are locked. We're trying to regain control, but it's like someone is moving faster than we can react." Thalmar turned back to Amelia, his suspicions now a bitter truth in his mind. She had known. She had known something was coming. And she had been preparing for it. But why? Why would she be involved in something so dangerous? Amelia's gaze met his once more, her expression unreadable. "You're not ready for this, Thalmar," she said softly. None of you are. But you will be. And with that, she turned and walked toward the door, leaving Thalmar in stunned silence. The ship was under attack, and the person responsible was standing right in front of him. But Amelia wasn't just an innocent bystander. She was a part of this. She had been preparing for this moment. And now Thalmar was faced with the harsh reality that his wife was not the weak, helpless human he had thought her to be. She was something far more dangerous, and the galaxy was about to find out just how dangerous humanity could be. Thalmar stood frozen, his mind still racing with the shock of Amelia's words. "You're not ready for this, Thalmar," she had said, her voice calm and assured. And now, as the ship's alarms blared louder, he understood the full meaning of what she had said. He wasn't ready. Not at all. The Seraphim was being invaded, its most secure systems breached with unsettling ease, and the one person who should have been by his side, the one person he thought he could trust, had been a part of it all along. The crew members around him were panicked, shouting orders, scrambling to regain control of the ship's core systems. Thalmar's own thoughts were a whirlwind, his chest tight with anxiety. He had to act fast, but he knew that time was slipping away, and the ship's powerful defenses were slowly being overrun. The Seraphim wasn't just a ship. It was the heart of caravan diplomacy. If it fell, the consequences would be catastrophic, not just for the caravans, but for every species the caravans had alliances with. "Captain!" Lieutenant Varn shouted, snapping him out of his thoughts. "The breach is spreading."
We've lost control of the gravity fields in sectors 17 to 24. They're destabilizing.
Thalmar's heart sank. That was right next to the central command center. "Where's Amelia?" he asked, his voice steady despite the growing panic in his chest.
"She left," Van replied, her eyes wide with disbelief.
"She's gone, sir, and we can't track her. It's like she vanished."
Thalmar's suspicion had been correct.
Amelia had planned this. She had never been the helpless human he had thought. He had seen it in her eyes, in the way she moved, in the quiet confidence she exuded. And now, as the ship shook with each jolt of the attack, Thalmar realized that the woman he had married wasn't just a political pawn. She was the mastermind behind this invasion. His mind raced through possibilities. How could she have done this? How could a human, an outsider, infiltrate the Seraphim with such precision? The answer was simple. She hadn't been just a human. She had been something more, something far more dangerous.
"Get me a direct line to the ship's central command," Thalmar ordered, his voice sharp and commanding.
"We've lost communication with the command grid," Varn said, frustration clear in her tone. "Whoever is behind this has locked us out completely." Thalmar cursed under his breath. "Then we'll have to do this manually. Prepare a team. We're going to the central systems." Without waiting for confirmation, Thalmar turned and marched toward the closest access point. His mind was set on one thing: finding Amelia and stopping whatever she was planning before it was too late. As he moved through the corridors, his footsteps echoing in the hollow, vast halls of the Seraphim, Thalmar couldn't help but wonder what Amelia had done to take control of the ship so completely. The Carivans were proud of their technology, proud of the layers of security they had placed around every system. And yet, here he was, unable to regain control. The Seraphim was vulnerable, and Amelia was at the center of it all. It wasn't just the ship she had breached. It was his entire worldview. His people had always been the strongest, the smartest, the most powerful in the galaxy. And now, in the span of a few short days, a human had turned everything upside down. The corridors were quiet as Thalmar and his team made their way toward the central control room. The usual bustle of the ship's crew was gone. All that remained was the hum of the engines and the constant alarms that signaled danger. "Captain!" Varn said, her voice urgent. "We're getting reports from all over the ship. The human faction has taken control of key systems. The gravity drives are failing, and the energy shields are down. Thalmar's stomach clenched. If the shields were down, they were exposed. The Seraphim was no longer invulnerable. And if they couldn't get the shields back online, the ship would be a sitting target for anyone who wished to destroy it. "Where is she?" Thalmar asked again, his voice low but filled with rage. "Where is Amelia?" "She's gone," Varn repeated, her voice shaking. "We've tried tracking her through the systems, but whoever's behind this has masked her movements. It's like she's erased every trace of herself." Thalmar clenched his fists, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had to find her. He had to stop this before it went any further. They reached the central control room, but the doors were locked. The security panel displayed a warning. "Unauthorized access detected." Thalmar's fingers hovered over the panel, ready to override the lock, but he hesitated. This was no longer just about getting back control of the ship. This was personal. Amelia had betrayed him, and he needed answers. Why had she done this? What was her goal? Thalmar input the override code, and the doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the ship's emergency lights. The central command station, once a hub of activity and power, was now eerily silent. "Captain?" Varn said, her voice trembling. "We're not alone." Thalmar's eyes narrowed as he scanned the room. The air was thick with tension, and then he saw it. The control panel in the center of the room was active, the holographic displays flickering, as if they were being manipulated remotely. A shadow moved in the corner, and Thalmar's heart skipped a beat. There, standing in the darkness, was Amelia. She had her back to them, her hands moving over the control panel with such speed and precision that it was clear she had been here for a while. The control systems responded to her touch, and the ship's alarms quieted, the chaos outside fading into the background. "You!" Thalmar's voice broke the silence, and Amelia turned to face him. Her expression was calm, as if she had been expecting this moment all along. "Ooh. Thalmar," she said softly, almost affectionately. "I'm surprised you found me." "I thought you'd be too busy dealing with the breach." Thalmar's hands clenched into fists. "What are you doing, Amelia? Why are you doing this?" Amelia smiled, but it wasn't a smile of affection. It was a smile of someone who had already won. "I'm saving humanity, Thalmar. You wouldn't understand, but I've had my reasons for everything I've done. All of it. The invasion, the breach. It's all part of the plan." "Plan?" Thalmar's voice was low with fury. "You've taken over our ship, betrayed us all. How can you justify this?" Amelia stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "It's not about justification, Thalmar. It's about survival. Humanity is being crushed under the weight of a galaxy that sees us as weak. But we're not weak. We're strong. And I've done what I had to do to ensure our survival. You're either with me or you're against me." Thalmar stood frozen, the weight of her words pressing down on him. Amelia wasn't just a pawn in a political game. She wasn't just a diplomatic tool. She was something far more dangerous. And now, with her control over the Seraphim, she had the power to change the balance of the entire galaxy. "I don't want to fight you," Thalmar said, his voice quiet but filled with the weight of 1,000 conflicting emotions. "But if you continue this, there will be no turning back." Amelia's eyes softened for a moment, as if she were considering his words. But then she shook her head, her smile returning. "There's no turning back, Thalmar." "Not anymore. This is the way forward. This is humanity's future." With that, she turned back to the control panel, her fingers dancing over the holographic screens. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Thalmar watched her for a long moment, the realization settling in. He had underestimated her. She wasn't just his wife. She was the beginning of something far greater, something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. And now, there was no stopping her. Thalmar stood still, his heart pounding in his chest as Amelia's words echoed in his mind. There was no turning back. She had made it clear that humanity's survival meant using whatever methods necessary, even if it meant taking control of the Seraphim and betraying the caravans. The central control room was eerily quiet. The ship, once a symbol of caravan strength, now seemed like a fragile shell, vulnerable and exposed. Thalmar's thoughts raced. He had spent his entire life believing in the superiority of his people, but now, everything was shifting beneath him. Amelia's plan wasn't just about survival. It was about something much bigger. She was rewriting the rules, and in doing so, she was changing the fate of the galaxy itself. Thalmar had known Amelia as a timid, ordinary woman, someone he had married for political reasons, but now he realized that she was anything but ordinary. She had infiltrated the Seraphim, studied its systems, and taken control with a precision that no one, not even the most skilled caravan, could have imagined. She had turned the tables, and now the ship's fate lay in her hands.
Thalmar.
Amelia's voice broke the silence, pulling him out of his thoughts. You have to understand, this was never about power for power's sake.
It's about saving humanity from the forces that would crush us under their heel. We've always been seen as weak, inferior, but we have the strength to survive. I've shown you that.
Thalmar's gaze remained fixed on her, his mind still struggling to comprehend the full scope of what was happening. He had been a soldier for the caravans all his life, fighting for the strength and honor of his people. But now he was faced with a choice that went beyond loyalty, beyond duty. He had to decide whether to stop Amelia and save his people, or to join her and watch as the galaxy's balance shifted forever. You've taken control of the Seraphim, Thalmar said, his voice low but filled with quiet rage. But at what cost?
You've betrayed everything we've worked for. You've broken the trust of the other species, the ones who trusted us.
Amelia's expression softened, but her resolve remained unshaken.
The galaxy has always seen us as a tool to be used, she said.
The Carivans have built empires, but they've also destroyed countless worlds, crushed entire civilizations beneath their boot. I won't let humanity be the next casualty.
I won't let us be wiped out just because we're not like the others.
Thalmar's hands clenched into fists. He could feel the weight of her words, the truth in them. He had seen the Carivans' conquests, the way they crushed weaker species to expand their influence. But the Carivans had always justified their actions, claiming that they were the strongest, that they were doing what was necessary for the galaxy's stability. But now, as he looked at Amelia, he saw the flaws in that reasoning. He saw the cost of strength, the price of survival. He felt torn. He had spent his life fighting for the Carivans, believing in their superiority, in their right to lead the galaxy. But now, with everything in chaos, he wondered if that was the right path at all. Was humanity's survival worth the destruction of everything the Caravan stood for? Was it worth the cost of the alliances that had taken years to build? Amelia stepped closer to him, her eyes searching his face. I never wanted to hurt you, Thalmar, she said softly. I never wanted to make you choose between me and your people. But you have to see the truth. You have to see that humanity's time has come. The Carivans, they're not the future. We are. Thalmar's breath caught in his throat. The words hit harder than he expected. He had always seen himself as part of something greater, part of a legacy of strength and wisdom. But now that legacy was crumbling before his eyes, and the future he had once believed in was slipping away. I don't know who you are anymore, Thalmar said, his voice thick with emotion. The woman I married would never do this. She would never betray everything she stood for. What happened to you? Amelia's expression grew more intense.
The woman you married was a pawn in a political game.
I never had a choice. But now, I've made my own. And you can make yours too. You can either stand with me, or you can stand against me. But know this, if you fight against me, you're fighting against the future. You're fighting against the survival of humanity. Thalmar felt his heart twist. He had always believed in the strength of his people, in the power of the Karivans to shape the galaxy. But Amelia had opened his eyes to something he had never considered. Was it possible that humanity, in all its flawed and imperfect ways, was capable of creating a new future? Was it possible that they could rise above the darkness and build something better? He didn't know, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't stand by and watch everything fall apart. He couldn't let the Karivans' empire crumble, not without a fight. But he also couldn't ignore the possibility that Amelia was right, that humanity's time had come. "You think this is the way forward?" Thalmar said, his voice a mix of disbelief and determination.
You think the galaxy will just accept humanity taking control? We're not taking control, Thalmar, Amelia replied, her voice firm.
We're taking our place in the galaxy. It's time for humanity to rise, to lead, not as pawns, but as equals. And if that means taking down the Karivans to do it, then so be it. Thalmar's eyes burned with anger and fear. The future she spoke of was a future of war, of rebellion. But perhaps it was a future where humanity would no longer be seen as weak, no longer be crushed under the weight of other species' dominance. He had to make a decision, and he had to make it now. There was no time to waste. The Seraphim was still under attack, and the longer they waited, the more damage would be done. The ship was slipping further into chaos, and it was only a matter of time before the enemy outside the ship noticed their vulnerability.
Amelia,
Thalmar said, his voice steady but filled with a new sense of purpose.
I won't fight you.
Not like this, but I won't let the Karivans fall without a fight either.
You've taken control of the Seraphim, but the galaxy isn't just yours to reshape. It's not just about one species, one people.
It's about all of us.
We all have to find a way to live together. Amelia's expression softened, but her eyes were still filled with resolve.
You don't get it, Thalmar, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There's no time for diplomacy anymore. The galaxy is changing, and we can either be part of that change, or we can be left behind. Thalmar stepped forward, his gaze locked with hers. Then let's change it together. The room fell silent. The sounds of the ship's alarms and the distant echoes of the battle outside faded into the background. It was just the two of them now, standing in the heart of the ship, at the center of everything that had brought them to this moment.
I'll stand with you,
Thalmar said, his voice low but filled with conviction.
but only if we do it right.
If we build a future not just for humanity, but for everyone, I can't stand by and watch you tear everything apart.
Amelia smiled, a hint of relief in her eyes. I never wanted to tear it all down, Thalmar.
I just wanted to build something new. Together, they turned toward the control panel, their fingers moving over the screens as they worked to stabilize the ship and regain control.
The battle was far from over, and the future was uncertain. But for the first time, Thalmar felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting for the Karivans anymore. He was fighting for something greater, a future where humanity and every species could stand together as equals. The Seraphim may have been lost to them for now, but there was hope. And hope, he realized, was more powerful than any technology, more powerful than any weapon.